Hello everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at models in Shadow Empire, how they work and what it takes to get a good one. So let's start with the very basics. Models are the individual types of unit that make up the counters that you see on the map. So each counter has a set formation and is then made up of various little types of models. Like for example, this one is a machine gun infantry brigade, and as part of that it has both troopers and machine gunners. Fairly simple. So models are designed by the Model Design Council, which seems fairly obvious from the name. And there's two things that the Model Design Council does. It designs models and discovers them. The discovery is usually something that you don't necessarily want to put a lot of points towards, because any points that the design model doesn't use simply go over to discovery. So for example, you didn't set it to discover and to design anything for a turn, it would just spend all its points on discovery. And what discovery is the spending that unlocks all the various types of models. And as you can see here, there's a tree where you get various technologies and then you unlock the different types of model using the Model Design Council's discovery, and then you then design models inside those types. And there's a fair amount of customization that goes into this. First we're going to have to go back to what actually these little units are. And each unit is a set of stats, and these stats, I'll just quickly go through them. This is hit points or defense. People seem to use it interchangeably. This one here is soft attack and defense, and this one's hard attack and defense. And soft attack and hard attack are the ones that against soft attack is against infantry and other non-armored things, and hard attack is against armored things like APCs, tanks, walkers, armored cars, etc. Now you'll see the soft attack, soft defense here is separated by a slash, and that means when a unit is attacking strategically, i.e. when you send this unit to attack enemy units in another hex, it has 48 soft attack, and that's the attack value it uses. And the defense is the value it uses when it's defending strategically. In the fight, it will always use one of these two, not a combination of both, and when say it's attacking and defending. So this is determined on the strategic level, not on the individual combat level. And it's the same for hard attack, hard defense. So as you can see, this infantry is a bazooka, and it is much better at defending than it is attacking. It's actually twice as good. This is all baked into the model stats, and there's a table in the manual which you can go look at. For example, if you look at tanks, tanks are better on the attack, about 50% better on the attack than they are on the defense. And for armored units, there's a small wrinkle here in the hit points. So this is versus infantry and versus non-infantry. Tanks are better at resisting attacks from other tanks than they are at resisting attacks from infantry, because tanks obviously suffer when infantry get to engage them without support. Right, so you've got all these stats. This is their consumption, this is their ammo use, this is how many attacks they have per combat round. It's all fairly well, it's all explained by the mouse overs, and it generally does what you'd expect. During combat, the attack value is rolled against the hit points of the defending unit, and then you score a hit depending on whether you beat them. There's a lot more nitty-gritty to it. Everything is modified by readiness and morale and entrenchment and a bunch of other stuff, but that's the very basics of the combat system. And what this means is that all your models are going to have different stats. You can go to the management tab and then model, and it will basically tell you this. Now, at the most basic level, models are type. So we saw this. They can be an infantry, they can be a machine gun, they can be a bazooka, they can be a mechanized artillery. And that type determines what sort of equipment they can use. Now, if we go to, the decisions, where I have this turn, the ability to develop a new model. And for example, if I wanted to upgrade my machine gunners, and in here you have this, make a brand new design or build upon the existing designs. And whether you want to do that depends on a lot of factors, and iterating models more and more gets more and more expensive, so you end up having to spend quite a lot of bureaucratic points to actually get the new model. Now, I'll go back to whether you want to do that later, but I'll first quickly just show how it works with selecting the equipment. So a machine gun is fairly simple. You have the type of weapon it uses, which in this case we would want laser assault rifles, and then you have the type of armor. And all the armor has basically ever increasing amounts of defense and caliber thickness, but as you can see, the cost escalates as well. So as an example there, we've just told it to do that. Now, if you were to do a mechanized unit, you would be having the same problem in that you would have to choose a weapon, have to choose armor, and then you'd have to choose engine. And the engine is probably the least important one of those stats, because the actual combat stats are determined by the weapon and the armor. And how they're determined gets into the trickier parts of model design, which is the stats for the model and how they're generated. So you can see here in the quality section of the model, we're just looking at infantry now. I've iterated this line troops model 5 times now, and each time you can see that first they only had combat armor and automatic rifles, and then they picked up heavy combat armor, and then they finally got laser rifles. And as you can see, the cost escalated as well as their combat value. Now, if you go to the design, which is basically tells you everything you need to know about the model and how good it is, it displays the similar stats to when you click on them, it displays the same things. This process is fairly well illustrated here, and that you can see every time we built a new model, we got slightly better, and then there are big jumps. An example, hit points when we upgraded to heavy armor, and even bigger jumps in attack when we upgraded to lasers. But that's not the only thing that makes a difference. The biggest determinant of how good a model is these weapon design and armor design scores. Engine design is left out because it's an infantry and they don't have an engine. And these scores, these weapon and armor scores, are what directly determines your amount of hit points and your attack. Now we can just do a quick calculation to show this is true. As in here, this firepower of 376 for the laser armed infantry. At base, we can look at the, oh no, it's not there. We can look at the laser rifle, which I believe, I don't have it here, but you'll just have to believe me that the basic firepower of a laser rifle is 300. So it has a base of 300, and it's better than the equivalent of the automatic rifle, which is 100. So we have a base of 300, and then the firepower is further increased by our technology, because when I built the model, I had 51 points in energy small arms optimization, which is a tech from the actually no, it's not the Military Council anymore, it is the Engineering Council, Applied Science Council. So this 51 points gives us a bonus firepower of 76 in this case. So we go look at the design, so it's 300 plus 76, and that gives the firepower. Fairly straightforward, but when we get that, what happens is the weapon design score of the model then multiplies by, this is a percentage score, so this multiplies the firepower to give us the final soft attack. So you can see that it's got 421 soft attack on the defense, and I know because I've looked at the table in the manual that soft attack on the defensive for infantry is just a flat, it equals their firepower. So if we go 376 and then we multiply it by 112%, 421, which perfectly matches there. And the same thing happens with soft attack, but infantry have a 50% malice to attack when they're attacking, which is a bit recursive, but in the end, you can sort of see the point I'm making, in that these armor weapon scores are what directly determines the firepower and hit points of the unit. It's a similar thing for heavy combat armor, because that has a base of, I believe, 400? No, 300, something like that. I've forgotten exactly what the base is for heavy armor, but it's the same principle. It doesn't oh no, sorry, there it is. Armor strength. So the armor strength is the base of, you can see these two troops both have heavy armor. So they have a base strength, and then you can look at the personal armor bonus. So this one receives a 59, and because we improved the personal armor technology, this one receives an 89. So the difference between them is 30 points, and you go look here and the difference is 30 points. So this armor strength is then multiplied by the armor design to give a points of 566. And this big jump in between the two models, despite them both using heavy armor, is a combination of, you can see the armor design score increased enormously, and the thing that the armor score was multiplying, the armor strength, was increased by personal armor at the same time. So it became quite a large difference. And here we get into the nitty-gritty, which is how these weapon and armor scores are designed. Now, they are the only things that determine the attack and defense of the unit. There's nothing else. These other design and structural scores don't directly influence it, but what they do is influence the rolls that happen when you design a new unit. And you can see the iterations here in that my inventory started off and it had 88 and 87%, and then the next model had 105 and still didn't increase its armor score. And the next model rolled quite poorly in its design and didn't increase it again, because when you design a new iteration of a model, essentially you get to re-roll these weapon and armor scores, and if the re-roll is higher than the current value, it increases it. And these are just, like I said, a flat percentage modifier of your armor strength and your firepower. Right, so this is where it gets a bit nitty-gritty, in that all units have a structural design score and a basic design score. And what these measure is, the structural design score is a value which is created when the unit is first created. The first iteration of it gets given a structural design score, which this is between 70 and 130. And the average is 100. So these guys are slightly worse than average, but not enormously. Basic design is a value between, which is, again, given when the model is first designed, which is a value between 70 and 100. And this one you want to be lower, because a lower basic design score means that there's more room for improvement in the model. And this one, as you can see, it's 94, so it's not great. It's much higher than I would ideally have hoped. And what happens is that there's this thing called field testing, and you get field testing by using your unit in combat, and if it's killed or if it inflicts kills, the field testing score for that model increases slightly. And as you can see, we've got a field testing score of 83%. And as you remember, I said previously that the weapon, armor, and if you're using a tank, the engine design scores are re-rolled every time you make a new iteration on a unit. So what happens there is there's a formula which I believe is half the base design, half the base design plus 4d20, which is then modified by the structural design as a percentage. So in this case, we've rolled sort of 45, we've taken sort of 47, and then we've rolled 4d20 and then multiplied it by 94% to get these two scores. And they're rolled separately, they're not rolled the same, despite them being very close there. And then again, when it happened here, the base design score was increased by the field testing. So the field testing increases this basic design, and then you get half this plus another roll of 4d20, which is then multiplied by structural score, and nothing ever changes structural score. It always stays the same. So in this case, we rolled lower than 88 for that roll, so the armor didn't improve in this model. But we rolled higher, and so the weapon score design improved, which increased the firepower. And you can look at the technologies. There was a small increase as well from conventional small arms tech being better, but not massive. That's only 13 firepower difference, whereas the actual attack increased by a significantly larger amount than that. I hope this makes sense, because it is a bit hard to wrap your head around, but once you do, it is quite a good system, I think, because it incorporates that randomness that you often have a lot with real life equipment, where things can overperform, underperform, and the sort of iterative improvement that goes on in the field. As experience with it, which is represented by the field testing, filters back to the designers and they make the next version. You can see the same thing happens with the light tanks. Again, this one has got a very good structural design score, and basically with the field testing it gets improved every time. The actual equipment changes as well, which leads to big jumps in scores. But if you just simply look at the design scores, you can see it iteratively improves until it's now an Abraham 3, and that's a very good scores. I'm very happy with this tank, and the next model will be even better. Right, technologies are, as you can see, just generally flat boosts to things that the units do. Fairly simple. The more you optimize your vehicle armor, the more armor strength you'll get, which as you can see here, translates into hit points. And if I was to multiply the armor design by the armor strength, it would receive that hit point value. Generally that is the simple thing, but just to go back to the very basics, what you want to look for when you're rolling a new model is, generally as a rule of thumb, you want a decent structural design score. I would usually have 90 as my bare minimum. If it's under 90, I won't even design. I'll just make a completely new model because it's just not going to be good and worth it in the long term. And you also want a low basic design, which can be improved. As you can see, the basic design improves across the models because of all this field testing that's going on. There are also other things that influence the actual combat, like weapon caliber and armor thickness, but I'll address that later in a different tutorial about how the nitty-gritty of combat and fighting actually works. But yeah, the big thing to remember is weapon and armor design, as well as engine, but engine's less important, directly influence the armor and firepower, which are set by technologies and the equipment the design is using. And the weapon and armor design are re-rolled when a unit is iterated upon. And the scores for these, the actual weapon and armor designs, are determined by the structural and basic design scores plus a random dice roll. And you can never make a unit worse. You can only make a unit better, because if you roll under the armor and weapon design scores, it doesn't decrease. You can see here that you have a chance to increase it even when you don't actually have any field testing. Now, I built these bazookas and they were quite good structurally. And as you can see, the basic design doesn't really increase because I haven't done any field testing, because no one actually did any fighting with them. But as I iterate the models, I still get an improvement in the weapon and armor designs. It's just not as drastic because there's no boost to the basic design score because of field testing. Now, I hope this makes sense. It is one of the more tricky bits of the game to understand, but once you do, like I said before, I think it does make sense, and it is quite a nice system. It's one that can encourage you to use older models or iterate upon older models rather than the latest, greatest thing, because they're more efficient, or just the experience your army has with them means they perform better in combat despite maybe not having the latest, greatest technology. In practice, it can be that the jump between technologies is so big that you want to use the newer tech versions even if the older tech version is better, but it all does come down to the individual situation. Right, finally, with models, there is a quality that can be assigned to them. And you see these, this is a bit more advanced. Obviously, it's fairly basic. Obsolete simply just means that you don't want to use the unit anymore, and all versions of it are recalled to your Supreme headquarters from the field. And that's, for example, this very basic Abraham tank here. This is what's happened to it. I've set it to be obsolete, so the only versions left are the ones that have been recalled to the SHQ. Now, you can see, for example, this Abraham 2 tank, and it's out of date. It's not using very good techs or equipment, but I haven't told it to recall because it's still useful to have, and building replacement tanks is quite expensive. So any tanks is better than no tanks in this case. I haven't bothered in this case, but what you could do is you could set it to, for example, low quality because it's now obsolete. And then the individual formations, these are the OHQ, operational HQ formations, can be set to what sort of units they allow. So there's low, regular, high, and elite. And there's 3 settings. There's allowed, tolerated, and disband. Disallow. And what these mean is allowed means they're fine with this, any sort of unit or any sort of elite, high, regular. So they're all, by default, they're all set to allow everything. If, for example, I wanted to make a machine gun infantry brigade, now these assault infantry brigades have tanks integrated with the infantry, right? So I don't want to use my latest and greatest tanks as infantry support. So I would put everything to tolerated and then set the Abrahams to low, and then all the other guys that use tanks, just an example, there's some attached to this machine gun brigade as an independent unit, I would disallow low quality. So what's going to happen is these guys are going to go, no, we don't want these tanks anymore. They're going to send them back to the SHQ, and the SHQ is going to go, okay, we're going to dispatch it to the assault infantry brigade. This can be good for keeping, for example, these guys are really slow. So compared to the much, much faster modern tanks, I don't want them slowing them down. So I'm going to concentrate them all into units, and this is how you do that. It's a little bit trial and error in some ways, in that it's not immediately obvious what effects it will have, but I hope this has made it clear that you can stop specific models from going into specific units, and that is the main point of it. Right, that pretty much covers models. I'm going to do another one explaining the combat and how it actually works soon enough, but as you can see, this is from my latest, greatest multiplayer game, and things are going reasonably well. But yeah, just a quick recap on the basics. Weapon and armor design are multiplied by firepower and armor to give hit points and attack. Engine design simply gives you a more powerful, less powerful engine. And structural and basic design, as well as field testing, are what determines the weapon and armor design in an iterative fashion. Right, that's all from me today, and I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you soon.